All right, this is the content acquisition podcast of Down syndrome, and this podcast will specifically cover the Down syndrome characteristics. And so to begin, we will create a roadmap of what will be discussed in the video. So the first part will be defining Down syndrome. Then the prevalence of students with Down syndrome will be discussed. Third, we will review the physical characteristics. Fourth, we will review the social characteristics. Fifth, the behavioral characteristics will be discussed. And sixth, the academic characteristics will be addressed. And then we will close with a review. So part 1 will be definitions. And so Down syndrome is a genetic condition that arises from the defect of chromosome 21. And there are 3 different types of Down syndrome. The first is called trisomy 21, and about 95% of people with Down syndrome have trisomy 21. With this type of Down syndrome, each cell in the body has 3 separate copies of chromosome 21 instead of the usual 2. So in this picture, you will see, in this karyotype, you will see that there are 3 copies of chromosome 21 right here. The second type of Down syndrome is called translocation, and this type accounts for a small percentage of people with Down syndrome, about 3% of the population. And this occurs when an extra part or a whole extra chromosome 21 is present, but it is attached or translocated to a different chromosome rather than being separated from chromosome 21. So as you see in the picture, you have 2 copies of chromosome 21 here, but the third copy is over here on 14. So it's translocated. The third type of Down syndrome is called mosaic, and this type affects about 2% of people with Down syndrome. And mosaic means mixture or combination. So for children with mosaic Down syndrome, some of their cells have 3 copies of chromosome 21, but other cells may have the typical 2 copies. And so the mixture of 2 types of cells, some containing 46 chromosomes and some containing 47. And so those cells with 47 chromosomes contain an extra chromosome 21. So because of the mosaic pattern of the cells, the term mosaicism is used. And so you can see the pattern here, all the mosaic. So you can pause here and answer the question, what are the 3 types of Down syndrome? And then when you answer the question, you can go ahead and continue. The second idea we discussed that will be discussed is prevalence. And so Down syndrome is actually the most common type of genetic condition. Today, there are 400,000 Americans with Down syndrome. 6,000 babies are born with Down syndrome each year, and that would be 1 in every 700 babies. The extra copy that causes Down syndrome can originate from either the father or the mother. Nothing that a parent did or did not do during pregnancy causes a baby to have Down syndrome. While the age of the mother can be a factor, 80% of the people with Down syndrome are born to parents under the age of 35, with the average age being 26. Down syndrome occurs in males and females evenly. So you can pause here and answer the question, how many babies are born each year with Down syndrome? And when you answer the question, you can go ahead and continue. The third idea is the physical characteristics of Down syndrome. And one physical characteristic of Down syndrome is the facial features. So typically students or individuals with Down syndrome have an upward slant to their eyes, and they are an almond shaped. They have a flattened facial profile, and they have an enlarged tongue that protrudes from their mouth. Another physical characteristic of Down syndrome is the increased risk for vision, hearing, heart, and hormone health conditions. A third characteristic, physical characteristic for Down syndrome is that they typically have a small stature and they're shorter in height as children and adults compared to other typically developing peers. And they also tend to have a low muscle tone. A fourth characteristic is a single line across the palm of their hand called a palmar crease. So here you can answer the question, what are the physical characteristics of Down syndrome? So go ahead and pause the podcast, answer the question, and then resume when you are done. The fourth idea of this podcast is the social characteristics associated with Down syndrome. So individuals with Down syndrome typically love social interaction. They self-advocate for themselves. Their social understanding, empathy, and social interactive skills are strengths for children and adults with Down syndrome. And these can be built on throughout life to enhance their social inclusion and quality of life. People with Down syndrome are usually good at communicating with others, and they understand them. And they even can take advantage of people around them at times. They're very smart. They usually are communicative and curious about life, and they constantly desire to see new places and meet new people. Some social issues they may face are they may be overly direct with others, they may perseverate on one friend and won't give them space when asked, they are slower to speak, they can take more time in a conversation to gather their thoughts, and they can get embarrassed if they're in front of a large crowd. All people with Down syndrome are different, though. They have different characteristics, and it depends on the environment that they're in or how they grew up. So you can pause here and answer the question, what are the social characteristics of Down syndrome? And when you answer that, you can go ahead and press play and continue. The fifth idea of this podcast is the behavioral characteristics of Down syndrome. And one characteristic in this category would be the short attention span they have. They may need reinforcement or prompts to check back into the task at hand. Another behavioral characteristic is they may be oppositional or defiant. It is present in Down syndrome, and it may be a way of communicating frustration or lack of understanding. Children with Down syndrome are often very good at distracting parents or teachers when they are challenged with a difficult task. Another behavioral characteristic is that children and adults with Down syndrome may have impulsive behaviors, and so they may have an irresistible urge to act in a given way. I know a girl she tends to be sneaky or hide and steal objects from classmates, and so she's very impulsive in that way. Another characteristic would be obsessive compulsive behaviors, and so this is also present in Down syndrome. An example of that would be it could be repetitive in a way such as they may want to sit in the same chair every day, or it can be in like manifesting through habits like dangling beads or belts when not engaged directly in an activity. So you can pause here and answer the question, what are the behavioral characteristics of Down syndrome? And when you're done, you can go ahead and press play and continue. So the sixth section of this podcast reviews the academic characteristics. And so at school, students with Down syndrome may have trouble with multi-step and complex directions. They may have a hard time with communication, having delayed language and speech. And they learn at a slower pace, and so they may need more cognitive processing time. So you can pause here and answer the question, what are the academic characteristics of Down syndrome? And go ahead and press play when you're finished. So, to review and close this podcast, Down syndrome is a genetic condition caused by the development of an extra copy of chromosome 21, and that causes both physical and intellectual disabilities that bring developmental problems such as learning disabilities, physical disabilities, and cognitive impairments. Thanks for watching.